There's more and more emphasis on being true to yourself, which is amazing. But if you have had childhood or life trauma, it can be really difficult to show up in a way that feels true because the ways that you showed up in a true way have not been safe or secure or brought the best results. Oh, this is harder than I think it will be. When we are dysregulated, so if we are upset, having a meltdown, having big emotion or experience in some way, this is all what I would label dysregulation. So it means that we're having a disorganized response to what is happening. So if we have something happens that is stressful, instead of being able to feel it and tell ourselves that we will be okay, we'll move through it, that most often than not, we are just fine, it can be a big reaction in our nervous system. So maybe we go to catastrophizing. We're feeling like this will never be okay. Everybody's going to leave us, or that we just need to leave and get out of there to protect ourselves. So we learn that dysregulation is not safe or secure, and we need to develop all of these less adaptive coping mechanisms like numbing or detaching or lashing out further in order to be okay and protect ourselves instead of leaning into purpose and connection and all of these excellent tools that we might have available for us in a certain environment that is good for us. We start to figure out how to move through dysregulation, even in utero. And let's talk infancy. So every time we have a need, if we are crying, if we are upset, if we are needing a diaper change, needing connection. So there are these core needs that infants are sharing with us. And when they have a sensation in the body, they can feel it and they have a reaction. So they have something that comes up as a reaction or a way that they are demonstrating that need. An adult responds to them ideally. So ideally, adults attune and they notice, oh, this baby needs to eat, and they can feed the baby. Or this infant needs to be held and rocked and cuddled, and they get this very core need of connection met. So this is all called co-regulation. So we have dysregulation. Now we're learning co-regulation. And that is what develops the ability to manage our emotions or to self-regulate. So when we go through this sequence, thousands of interactions, doesn't need to happen this way every time, of course, but more often than not, we want to have responses to needs in a helpful way. And this is what allows kids to develop, or allows even adults to develop, the internal tools to feel safe through emotion. Now let's break down what happens when this doesn't happen. So if we have a toddler, for example, and the toddler is in this brain development stage where their brain is changing a ton. They are reactive, they are impulsive because they are developing the higher level parts of the brain that are more responsive or more logical. So when toddlers are in that brainstem level of development, it's really more animalistic. So thinking if they want something, they grab it. If they are angry, they push. It's this physical stage of expressing themselves. It's very reactive. On the other hand, they're also developing the higher level of the brain. So that be the limbic system, or the prefrontal cortex, which is their ability to relate to others, their ability to use words and develop their language centers, and their ability to regulate their thinking and impulse control, which is really in that prefrontal cortex region. So we go through these brain centers because all through life, when we're stressed, when we're dysregulated, especially, it's easy for us to resort to those primitive levels of the brain. So think about it as fight, maybe flight, freeze. And we'll talk about this and how becoming aware of our stress responses can be such a big way to move through trauma or wounding of the past. That then becomes, instead of expressed in a healthy way, so let's go back to that toddler, so maybe upset about something and pushes a sibling. If the adult response is to punish and almost demonize that toddler, so it's a young kid that is needing adult support, needing co-regulation. It doesn't mean that hitting is the end goal or that we want kids to be hitting for life. No, but it's telling us that behavior is communication. So the only way that that toddler is going to develop healthy impulse control, healthy ability to respond versus react, is if they have co-regulation through whatever emotion it is that they're experiencing or whatever sensation it is that they're experiencing. So if they're experiencing anger or sadness underneath. And then the adult punishes them or spanks them or tells them to go to their room and come back when they're calm, or tells them to think about what they did. It really blames the toddler for being intentional, which in this reactive state, the toddler is not intentionally in control of their behavior because their survival brain is taking over. So when they're having a big emotion, so when any of us are having a big emotion and we don't have access to the parts of the brain that say, hey, this is a human thing. This is healthy. This is typical. We will get through this. They only have the part of the brain that says, you need to protect yourself. You need to fight. You need to flight. You need to do whatever it takes to get rid of this stressor, or get rid of this threat, and to protect yourself. So we are wired to survive. So thinking back to when tigers were chasing us, for example, we might have had a tiger that we decided, okay, I need to fight this tiger. So you try to fight the tiger and then you realize, oh, that's not working. I am too weak to fight this tiger. I'm going to run and try to get away and flight or flee this tiger. So the next stress response looks like flight, which might be when kids are running or hiding or covering their eyes or getting away from a perceived threat in some way. Then you might realize that, okay, running isn't working either. And then your body starts to freeze. So maybe this is the deer in headlights look where you're just frozen. It's almost like you're stuck there, but you're really activated at a body level. So it's like you have all this activation and charge, like you want to run, but you can't. You're just stuck there frozen. Then let's say that doesn't seem so helpful. Playing dead is the next coping mechanism, stress response. So then the body might totally immobilize. And you can see this in impalas, for example. There's videos online that you can watch that are when an impala goes to that immobile limp state, and it's almost like they are dead. So the predator might think, oh, they're dead. This isn't as interesting anymore, and let them go is the hope. Or it's an ability for the body and the nervous system to navigate a lot of stress. So under the most stress, when fighting, flighting, freezing is not working, then they might go to the shutdown state. So these are all different ways that dysregulation can show up in kids and adults today. So maybe if you are a fighter, you might be the one that is quick to jump and criticize or blame or attack or lash out or have a less helpful response of fight or this maybe anger-driven, protective energy, versus having something that would be healthy or helpful, like assertiveness or sharing boundaries or sharing limits. Let's say you are a flighter. This might look like procrastination or avoiding what you are doing. So flighting can look a lot of different ways, even overthinking, analyzing everything that you did or need to do to avoid being in that body sensory feeling world. So overthinking is actually a way that we are programmed to protect ourselves and to get out of our bodies. So if as kids, think about this toddler or this young kid in their room alone. Alone is really the most stressful thing that can happen to a young human because of our need for co-regulation. So again, we are wired to be close to adults to get needs met. We are wired to connect, to get food, to get water, to get connection. This does not mean that an adult needs to be available at all times in all capacities and adhere to whatever the kids are needing. But what it does mean is that there needs to be some level of security in that there is an adult available for when they do need these things. And sometimes adults can't meet those needs, and that's fine. That's safe, that's secure. For example, if they're cooking dinner, they can't cuddle or they can't play a game. So it doesn't mean we don't have boundaries like that. But what this tells that toddler is that it is secure to feel fear. It is secure to have big sensations in the body. So if that toddler learns that they're punished for it, they don't have the logic to think, oh, well, mom, dad, grandma's having a hard day and they were stressed, so they sent me to my room. Maybe that wasn't the most helpful response. They also don't have the logic to say, wow, I guess I shouldn't hit. Hitting is detrimental. What they learn in this egocentric stage of development is that it's their fault or they're to blame, that their emotion is bad. And because we are emotional beings as humans, whether we like to admit it or not, we learn that we are not okay, that we are not acceptable. So flash forward to being an adult. And something happens where you feel angry. Maybe you got an email and suddenly you're angry. Instead of feeling, okay, I can regulate through this, I can move through this, this is safe, this is healthy, this is okay, we feel maybe that on one hand, there's something wrong with the other person, or it's all about blaming the other person or attacking the other person, versus being able to see our role or communicate in an assertive way. Maybe we have needs that we totally shut down. So maybe because we've learned that anger isn't safe or healthy to share, we learn that, okay, we need to type back and do whatever this person says and almost people please or meet their needs, manage that person's emotions, be overly responsible for whatever happened. So if there was any sense of criticism in the email, we might really take it to heart and really feel this shame bubbling under the surface that maybe we are aware of, maybe we're not, but it becomes that it's all about us. It becomes this false idea that it is all about us, is that there is something wrong with us at a core level. And all these thoughts start to spiral because we aren't feeling safe and secure, feeling that anger or feeling that sadness or feeling that fear. So because we're wired to move through emotional cycles, we are wired to get through a lot. This doesn't mean we're, should be totally unimpacted by whatever happens, but we have a window of tolerance, or we have a capacity to feel emotion and to move through it, release it, get co-regulation, get support when we need to, and move through. So there is evidence that shows that emotion lasts about 90 seconds if it is processed in a healthy way. And maybe even this can trigger shame because you're thinking, oh my goodness, I just spent the last 2 weeks in an emotional spiral. What gets in the way of this is the PTSD response of when we feel an emotion, then we have a lot of thoughts that are triggered by that emotion. So we feel sensation in the body, which is emotion in the body. I talk about sensation and emotion as they're duly coded, they're directly linked together. So when we feel sensation in the body, we're interpreting that as an emotion and vice versa often. So when we have that emotion come up in CPTSD, instead of thinking, okay, I got this, we'll move through this, we start to develop all these narratives that, oh no, it was something I did, or we see somebody's body language change. And instead of thinking, okay, well, they're an adult, they can manage their own emotions, I'm not responsible, I can trust that they'll tell me if they have a need or if they're bothered by something. I don't need to read into their nonverbal cues. I don't need to be hyper vigilant to whatever's happening for them. Instead of that, which is the healthy, hopeful response, we start to think, what did I do wrong? I can tell this person is bothered. I must have upset them in some way. Okay, I better apologize. I better backpedal and think about everything that I did or said, or was it something I did yesterday? Was it something I did last week? And then we start to almost create this emotional spiral. And what this is often an emotional flashback. So dysregulation can be caused by something in the present, or it can be caused by something in the past that is triggered by this present experience. So we start to see somebody's body language who might throw us back into how it felt when our parent got home and maybe they were kind of on edge or throwing bags around or rushing through or didn't say hello, or it didn't feel like the safe, secure connection when they got home. So we had to kind of modify the behavior or be hyper vigilant in order to be safe and secure and get needs met. So think about this for yourself. What emotions feel secure and safe to feel, and which feel more threatening? Now let's talk about what to do about this in real time. So if you are identifying with this and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I have some wounding, I maybe have some trauma, or maybe even I have this CPTSD or behaviors that can result in complex PTSD that can come from either emotional neglect or Parents and caregivers that just weren't available for whatever reason. So maybe that was physical illness, maybe that was emotional or mental health challenges of their own. Maybe that was that they were working all the time and you were on your own. So you were kind of hyper dependent or parentified and didn't have the ability to co regulate or to ask for help or get needs met. So you didn't feel comfortable to do that. So you just did it all on your own and soldiered through. So, first step of this is to identify your stress responses, your tendencies. So, when you start to get heated or tense, you can think to yourself, am I having a fight response? I maybe feel like attacking this person, or I feel like punching the wall, or I could throw a bowling ball out the window. My body is such a visceral charge. And is that a stress response that's telling us to go inward and check in with ourselves and regulate? Or is it a stress response that's telling us we need to set a boundary or share a limit or share something that we are or not okay with? And it's a sign that we actually need to share our truth or speak up about what we are experiencing. Anger gets a bad rap because everyone's afraid of how anger can impact others and harm. But when we start to do this work, we start to rewire that emotional dysregulation and that trauma wounding or narrative that comes up and says, ding, 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 not okay to be angry. You are really harmful when you're angry, or you are crazy, or you are out of your mind, or losing it, or ballistic, or whatever the judgments are that have come up around anger in the past. Now we get a chance to think differently about it. We can check in and say, okay, I'm having a fight response. Maybe this is because this is a really healthy need that I have that I can share at this point in my life. And I didn't get a chance to share back then because it was punished or shut down. Whatever the reason, it isn't about blaming anybody. None of this is about blaming anybody or who they were then, because people change and or they might not change, and it still isn't about blame as much as moving through that blame ourselves to see how this is showing up in us today, or what is this doing to impact our life today. Or we can think, okay, I'm a flighter, I avoid and then I resent later. So I avoid, or I'm kind of people pleasing, or just getting approval. I'm not really being authentic. I'm overthinking, I'm overanalyzing, doing all these things to stay safe that are not really impacting me in a healthy way. Or are you a freezer or a totally shut down? So freeze might look like when you feel this energy kind of wired but tired, or you have a lot to do, you have a lot of energy to do, seemingly a lot of mental energy, but physically you just feel trapped. Like the healthy, helpful things that you could do to self-regulate, and you just can't seem to do them. Instead, you're hitting that next button on Netflix, or you are scrolling on your phone for hours on end while you're with your kids, or it feels like these helpful things, but you can't have access to do them. It doesn't feel secure to do them or to move in some way. So first, know your stress responses. 2, validate yourself. So this doesn't mean validate the facts of whatever is happening, because sometimes the facts don't align with our reaction. What this means is to validate the emotion that you are feeling. By emotion, I mean sensation as well. So checking in with the sensation and the emotion of the body. For some, checking in with the body can feel really insecure or not helpful. I think I was one that I had kind of stuffed my emotions so far down that checking with the body didn't really feel relevant when I started all this. Kind of felt like, oh, I'll do it because that's what I'm being told to do. But I didn't feel that connection. My mind was more in go mode, and it took relational safety, somebody that I could trust enough to allow me to step into the body. And this was years of doing different body practices, so yoga and meditation, that can really either pull us into the body, which is the goal of it, or we can be in this intellectualizing, spiritualizing realm, which pulls us out of that body emotional world and kind of can perpetuate some of those unhelpful trauma responses or protective mechanisms that we may have. So validating is about validating the emotion that you feel. Maybe it's something that happened that's disappointing to you and you're having a really hard time coping with it. you're shut down, your sink is full of dishes, you're snapping at your kids. It can feel really challenging to just show up to life. So noticing any inner critic that pops up and is trying to protect you and say, you need to get it together. This is ridiculous. You're a slob. You're worthless. If any of that inner critic pops up, we can become aware of it. We can observe it. And then we can try to rewire that voice to an inner loving voice that might validate yourself. This was really important to you. It makes sense that it's so sad. It makes sense that it's so big. This feels hard because it is hard. This feels so challenging, and it shows how open your heart is becoming. It shows that you're open to be hurt. You're open to receive some of that humanity and pain that comes with being alive and being in this human experience. Then normalizing. So as we're doing this, it's really all checking in with the body, checking in with the sensory world, and normalizing while we are grounding in the room, in the space with somebody that we know or trust. Maybe that's a friend, maybe that's an animal. That can be an attachment figure for you, secure attachment figure. Animals are excellent for that. Maybe it's a counselor, therapist, maybe it's a recovery room. Some type of ability to normalize what you're going through. One of the biggest factors for me was joining a recovery room, of hearing everyone's stories and seeing them feel and seeing them go through this integration process from don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, that can come from dysfunctional systems, whether that's dysfunctional workplaces, dysfunctional family systems, all these dysfunctional behaviors that we may show. Develop this culture of not talking, not trusting, and not feeling. So when we start to talk and trust and feel, it can bring up all of these old protective mechanisms that can be really hard to move through. And having support for that and normalizing that can be so powerful and essential, in my opinion. Finally, it is all knowing your story and linking your past to your future, not to dwell on the past, which is a misconception that many have of this work. It's using your past and realizing that the behaviors that you have are so often shaped by those early years, because we're soaking everything up through the sensory world and the body. Those early years really become who we are. So when we have those kind of early upbringing moments of either being misunderstood or being punished, or whether even it's sharing the light or joy, what we found interesting, what we found pleasurable, reconnecting with all of that and honoring those memories or those experiences. Maybe not honoring, maybe that's not the right word if it was painful or wounding or traumatic memories, but recognizing the ways that reactions might show up today that are linked to the past. So recognizing when dysregulation is bigger than the situation at hand. Dysregulation is bigger than just being upset with your husband for leaving a dish in the sink. You suddenly feel triggered or abandoned or rejected, or like nobody cares about you, or that you're alone, or that you're doing everything and have no help. So it can throw us back into all these old reactions, images, and memories that might pop up. And when we're unconscious of it, it might feel like it's all your husband or all your partner in that moment. What consciousness does is it allows us to move through and look at our story from a holistic way, wholehearted way of, wow, I had some really magical parts of my life, and I have gotten so many gifts throughout my life, and people that have, I can think about maybe friends' parents that have supported me, or that teacher that really believed in me, or maybe nobody comes to mind. And that can be heartbreaking and a lot to grieve there too. But it allows us to notice that, wow, there were ways that I was impacted. And my ability to trust people is impacted by those early experiences. So I recognize that maybe you recognize that you're having a hard time trusting others, or that you over trust others. So dysregulation might show up as oversharing and kind of emotionally venting or dumping on somebody that isn't necessarily worthy of hearing your story yet. Or maybe it shows up as having really rigid boundaries and keeping everybody at arm's length and avoiding vulnerability totally because vulnerability hasn't been helpful in the past. Knowing your story is totally unique to you. Nobody else has lived your path. Nobody else offers what you have to offer our world. It becomes something that we can alchemize and use to our advantage. And I'm not saying this to silver lining anything that happened. I'm sending you a lot of care while watching this. If this has brought up some old things, take time for yourself. But it's thinking about how when we start to have the familiarity with our story enough to see the big picture and see how the ways we are struggling today might be linked to those early experiences or experiences throughout our life. It can be such a gift when it comes to relating to kids and co-regulating and being present for everybody in your life that you want to be present for. Also living your purpose and moving into a life that feels aligned with what you value and what you want versus approval, living external values and what everybody else wants from you. I hope this was helpful. I have another video on anxiety, which is something that can show up. And I'm talking about it in context of kids. Yet so often the things that I talk about with kids are really aligned with adults too. And that can be a big part of our path, is noticing how whether you have kids in your life now or you don't, it's such a parallel process that we can go through together. And every single human is navigating something in their life. So it is something that we are all in together. And I would love to hear your questions, thoughts, comments. So comment below with any of that. Subscribe and like. We'll be staying around for a lot more discussions on topics like these going forward. So thanks for watching, and until next time.